For best friends since way back when. Steel town roots in a story to spin. Pittsburgh streets in our bones. For best parts, for best hearts. This month we live it loud. This month we break the cloud.
Hi, welcome to Four Best Podcast. I'm Matt Kravitz, coming to you with our weekly podcast where four best friends come together to talk to you about the best things that happened to them in the last month. I'm joined today by Nate Kravitz.
Howdy, y'all.
Sergey Blykor,
Howdy, y'all, you besties.
and coming from the planet Hoth, it's Isaac the Iceman Scott.
Well, hello, everybody.
How are those tauntauns, Isaac?
Keeping lukewarm.
All right, and sharing with us his best will be Isaac Scott.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks, Mac. Thanks, everybody. So appreciate you all letting me talk a little bit about my best for this month. And so I'm pretty excited about this one. So this is going to be a little bit of a continuation from an episode that we talked before, actually probably several, right? Because it's going to be a combination. So if you remember back a few episodes, we talked about kind of this AI journey that was going on, right? Trying to learn all about how to utilize AI just for everyday life and how to use it as an enhancement. And so one thing I alluded to is I was using it for kind of recruiting for Lydia with volleyball. And so if you recall from the episode, I was talking about what's neat about the AI side of things is that you're able to build these different personas within AI and then kind of use it as like almost like a sounding board. And so I will tell you, Lydia has been on this volleyball journey. I know we've talked about her multiple times throughout this podcast of just all the things that she's going through. And most of that is because if I'm not working, I'm basically at volleyball. So if I'm talking about the best, it's probably either going to be at work or it's going to be something about volleyball. But what's been cool is that, we talked that she had the ankle injury, but then she recovered from that. She just played in their final tournament over this last month, which is just awesome to see her kind of back up to full strength. But all throughout this club season that she was going through, she is a sophomore, now a rising junior, and she has a desire to play volleyball in college. And so Rachel and I, neither one of us played, sports in college, so we don't know the first thing about what that takes. And I think what is just so neat is that in this day and age of AI is that if you ever run into something where it's like you don't know, you can basically reach out and you can use that sounding board of AI to try to figure it out. And that's exactly what I did. So I used Google Gemini and I built this, not agent, but basically just kind of this chat within Gemini of having it take on the persona of an NCAA executive recruiter and basically gave it all the inputs of what I'm looking for and how I want to be a guide kind of throughout. And so I started on this journey probably 6 months ago. And basically I've been using Gemini to help kind of lead the different steps that we need to do, what emails we have to reach out with, and it will even give like a good template that you can use that you can kind of build off of. And I will tell you, it has just made the process incredible and incredibly fast. So where, I think in this last tournament, it was a national tournament that was actually in Orlando, and there was over 400 colleges that were attending. And so what was so neat about Gemini is you're able to put in like the area that Lydia wants to study, what type of school she wants to play at, what are her stats, and then it will kind of formulate and say, hey, these are kind of the colleges that are a match, and so these are the ones you want to reach out to. And I'll tell you, there was almost 100 colleges that kind of hit that list. And so what was so neat, though, is that through using AI, I was able to kind of streamline that process, and we were able to send out all these emails ahead of time to get interest with her at the court. So it's just been really neat. And then, over this last month, I might have talked about it before, but basically colleges can't talk with her. Any Division I colleges can't talk with her until June 15th of their sophomore going into their junior year. And so that date has passed for her. Since that date hit, she's had several calls with different colleges and college coaches, which has been really cool. And several of them have invited her up to camp. And so basically there's some other rules within NCAA where they can invite them to camp and interact with them in person, but they can't do anything else with them in person. Like they can't have any sort of formal visits or anything like that. So we set up a trip and we have been traveling around to a couple different colleges that, were interested in her. And going to a couple different camps. And actually, just this week, we went to two. So we went to one down in Alabama, and now we're up in Ohio and going to a couple colleges up here. And one of the colleges that she went to the past couple days, I was actually over in Akron, Ohio, so at the University of Akron, which is a Division I college. And they've been very interested in Lydia. I've been talking with her, and so we actually made some last minute changes to come up so that she could attend their camp and kind of go through it. And she did the camp. They were very impressed by her, and they actually extended an offer to her yesterday to go attend their school on a full ride 5-year scholarship. So super awesome. And so, she's really pumped. We have a couple more camps that we're going to be checking out. So, maybe by the time that this episode releases, I'll have to, write over this and say that, she actually has decided to go there or she has something different. But what is so awesome is that she's put in an immense amount of hard work to get herself in a position to be able to play at a higher level. And, it really has paid off. And it's just so awesome to see because, there's a lot of self-doubt in her of like, hey, am I good enough to kind of play at this high level? And then to actually have somebody come back alongside of her and just be like, hey, you are good enough and I want you on my team. And we were just super impressed with the coach and the team. And, if she decides to go there, I think it will be just an amazing fit. So I say all that because it's like we went from not knowing anything, about this college recruiting journey to getting to the point where, she has an offer. And so it's awesome to see, her hard work, but then also utilizing the modern day technology to be able to help market that, to help gain interest and help, understand the pathway that we need to get her there. So it's kind of, my plug on both fronts. So just super proud of Lydia, super proud of all the hard work, and it's very well deserved because if anybody knows her, she puts in a ton of time into it. It is not natural for her. She works very hard all the time, sometimes 6-7 days a week, and is always doing something to just try to continue to improve her game. So it's just awesome to really see it pay off. So
That's awesome.
Yeah,
news,
congratulations. Lydia, if you're listening, we're so proud of you, all of us.
So proud. Isaac, do you know what the timeline is for like having to accept or reject an offer? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's, she's only becoming a junior, so I'd hope she has some leeway on figuring out like where she wants to do and like signing.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And so there are all sorts of like official dates, especially, I'm sure you guys are familiar with like the divisions, right? And so Division 1 is the top division, and then Division 2, Division 3, they all have different dates and requirements and restrictions and everything else. And so for the first question of like, hey, when does she need to give them an answer by? That's up to the coach because it's no different than like a job offer, right? Where it's like, hey, here's a job offer. You have this long to respond on when you want to have it. They're super excited about her, and they gave her a little bit of an extended time to kind of work through, knowing that she is kind of working on some different camps that she's going through and make a decision. They want her, and they really want her to be part of their team, and so they're basically willing to work with her. So she's got some time to decide to accept the offer. And then it's basically what will happen is she'll have a verbal commitment, which basically says, yep, I want to go here. But it's not official or binding until I think it's like November of her senior year, where she'll actually like, there's like, you sign like this letter of intent of like, hey, I'm going to go here. And at that point, then it becomes like a contract where it's like, yep, I'm going to be attending your school. So right now it's really just in this verbal commitment. So to your point, it's like, you're basically saying, yep, I want to come play for you. And as long as everything goes according to plan, that's exactly what will work out. But it's not official until it's official.
Awesome. Is she looking primarily like Rust Belt, or is it like...
She's really not. She's wide open. I mean, you guys know, we spent the majority of our life up in the Northeast. And so, kind of in that Pennsylvania, Ohio Valley area. And so, when some schools popped up there that were interested, I think, for her, she wanted to kind of play at a higher level, but wants to be in a good environment and have a, good coaching staff and a good group of girls that she can feel a connection with, that also has, a health science degree track, because she wants to study either exercise science or nutrition or something along those lines. So again, all those things kind of put into AI, and it was helped kind of narrow down these areas. And I'll tell you, University of Akron was not a school that any of us heard about. And so that's really kind of the power of that, AI, it's just is that we wouldn't have reached out otherwise.
So just kind of a quick follow-up question on that and a comment too. So for our audience, and I'm not sure, maybe Nate, Mac's probably pretty familiar here as we talk about persona work quite a bit at work myself. I actually just submitted an abstract around a lot of AI coaching and persona. Do you want to give the listeners a little bit of information about what is a persona? Why is it powerful? How can it be used?
Yeah. I'll start at Serge because I'm not an expert in it. And since you're writing abstracts, you could probably build on it. But basically, what I'll tell you is the neat part about AI is you can basically have it take on, a different persona or personality of whatever you may have, right? And I think I talked a little bit about this in our previous episode where we talked AI, based on that book that I was reading, The AI Driven Leader, where they talk all about that, where it's like, hey, you could have AI take on the role of somebody else. So say like you're doing a presentation and you're like, hey, I want you to act like a, grizzled CFO of a company who is very skeptical of any sort of new ideas that come up or something like that. And I'm going to present this to you and I want you to give me feedback on it. And so you can have that kind of safe space sounding board and trial stuff to get yourself set. Or in our case, what we did is, again, said, hey, I want you to act like an NCAA executive recruiter, and I want you to kind of lead us and guide us through the recruiting process. Tell us what to do, tell us what not to do, tell us what are good ideas, tell us if we need to do something different, if we need to, reach out more persistently, if we need to change the tone of something, and just be our guide throughout this whole process. And so that's exactly, what it did. And so it took on that role. And so as I would just continually feed new information into it, then it would just generate new responses back and it would keep track of everything and it would help us kind of guide it through. But essentially that persona is you can have AI basically channel the form of whatever you would want it to be or act like so you can bounce it off. But I'm sure Sergio probably have some deeper explanations.
No, my friend, you nailed it. That's exactly how I would explain it to anybody that's listening and is interested in using personas, is to give it a personality, which is, traits and rituals and habits and all sorts of things of any specific type of person that you want to build. What I find it to be really fascinating for is the idea that before AI, right, the idea of being coached or mentored was incredibly exclusive. You'd have to have a connection. You'd have to have money. Finding somebody, like you said, an NCAA, a professional of any sort would be quite a bit of money to be able to get consulting work. Mm-hmm. Now, just by going into any of these, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, whatever that might be that you prefer, and saying, could you take on this role, and being able to ask questions is such a simple way of starting from nothing. Mm-hmm. So certainly a real person is always going to be one of the best things, right? Because you want to network, you want to get out there and you want to talk. And I know, Isaac, you're really, really great at that. But being able to have that starting point with AI to help you can really help launch somebody. So just really cool that you're sharing that and you're combining, the passions and helping her to figure out how to use the technology to move that forward. So mm-hmm. just very cool.
I just want to add a little bit on top of that, which is really, if you don't do that role setting, AI is not much better than just doing a Google search, right? So, but creating those personas, creating those roles, creating those expectations when you start those prompts makes a huge difference. So anyone that is using AI, like, make sure you do that. You may even want to do things like ask it to not be sycophantic. So it's really being critical with your work. Mm-hmm. So it's giving you like the best and most meaningful feedback, because that's going to really help you in a way that if you don't do it, you are just Google searching. It's like a worse version of Google almost.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I mentioned it last time, but for all of our listeners out there, if you need a good book, even whether you're in leadership or business or not, there's a book called The AI Driven Leader by Jeff Woods. And he really just kind of breaks that down of like the basics of how you can build that persona and what to do, what not to do, and how to make sure that you can mitigate like the AI hallucination, because that's another thing too, right? Is that you don't want to trust blindly, which we talked in previous episodes as well. But I also think the one other benefit is that you're also dealing with, a thought partner who has an almost eidetic memory, right? Where it's like, if you're in that chat, like I have this long running chat with this NCAA executive recruiter persona, and it just remembers all the interactions. So something that we talked about 6 months ago, it can recall that and it can build off of it. And it will say, hey, don't forget, you already emailed that coach, and this is what you said before. And so, hey, make sure that, you're kind of changing the tone a little bit, or make sure you're putting this highlight in there. And so it's really just, it's a good guide to help.
Yeah. Isaac, were you surprised by what schools it's like recommending, what schools are like higher rated Division I schools for volleyball? Because I gotta imagine that, yeah, there's probably some Div 1 schools that people think of that are like, oh, they're also good with volleyball, but
Yeah.
my guess is that the football schools are not all the same as like the volleyball schools. And for the most part, people know like the football schools and maybe the basketball schools, but
Sure.
after that, like, who knows?
Yeah. Again, I'm not an expert in this space, but what I would say is, there's criteria to be a Division One school, and you have to have so many sports. I forget what they are offhand. Like
It's like
might be
sports and
20.
like,
Well, it's like programs.
yeah.
Like the school has to fund. I think it's like 20 or something like that. Somebody could probably Google it, but there's like you have to have a certain amount of sports for Division One, a certain amount of sports for Division Two, Division Three, and then there's different rules and criteria, right? So like for Division One sports, it could be those football places because they're like, hey, we have a really strong football team, and so we want to play the best teams in the country. So then they move up into the Division One league, and so to do that they have to have certain criteria that they need to meet, but then the whole school has to be Division One. So if their program moves to that, then everybody's got to be Division One. And so one of the schools that Lydia went to was actually University of West Florida, and they're a Division Two school. And next year they're actually converting over to Division One because they have I think a really great either basketball program or football program. There's another sport there that's really strong, and so the school wants to move up into Division One to be able to be more competitive there. But then with that, there's also different criteria, right? So like we talked about, like the scholarship, like she's been offered a full ride scholarship, so everything is covered for her. When you think of like tuition, room, board, meals. There's even like stipends and all sorts of stuff that they get for being a Division One athlete. And then you go to Division Two, and it's like half of that. And then you go to Division Three, and there's none of that. You don't get any sort of scholarships, and that's in the NCAA rules. So it just depends on what works and what's a fit, and most importantly, what's the school and program that you want to go study, right? Because I mean, again, volleyball is, in Lydia's case, it's like it's fun, but hey, that's not life. I mean, she's got to be able to go to school to get the education that's going to set her up for future things in life. And so this is a huge catalyst to help her go down that road and accomplish it.
Really don't know much about the AI things, but I'm so excited for Lydia, and I think that this is really cool. And selfishly, then to throw this out there, really want to like watch her play at a high level, and so looking forward for that opportunity. And I know, Serge, that you put on me that we're all proud of Lydia, and I guess maybe there's a little conflict between Lydia and I'd like to carry that on into this episode. And I can't name anything about it in particular, but I just think that it's healthy to pick on her a little bit. And so if she had 4 people building her up, I'm just afraid that that'd be too much. And it's too easy to get an ego when you're the type of athlete that she is. You could imagine her just getting carried away with that. And so I'll just put her down a little bit and just say, a couple years ago, I was still able to jump and hit higher than her on the wall. Could I do that now? I don't know. But I just throw that out there, Lydia. Throwing it down. Might be getting up higher than you still. 43-year-old man.
And to our listeners out there, Nate is being a sore loser about Lydia's Duolingo streak because they go against each other, and Nate will never catch her because she's beating him by a couple hundred days.
For some reason, it always stays a couple hundred days in front of me. It doesn't make any sense.
But yeah, Nate, to comment on your statement around being able to see her play at a high level, I think what's really cool is this, say that she would go to this University of Akron, they stream all the games on like ESPN Plus, and so there's ways for it to be televised, which I think is going to be just a little surreal.
I think Nate was hoping to buy tickets.
Wild.
Yeah.
Are you flying down, Nate? Be there, man. Be there, be square.
I'll tell you what, if she hit college level and playing, if there's some important games and Isaac's like, hey, we're all man, I'll be there. We may try to find a way to make it to some games. That'd be really cool.
You may sit on the opposing team's side, but you'll be there.
Well, I just heard that they're really good, and I like what they stand for.
So, well, awesome. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you letting me kind of bring that up and brag about it. Again, I know I talk a lot about my kids and volleyball, but outside of work, that's all I do because we pretty much just continue to go down this road and this path. But pretty exciting news, and just really cool to see all of Lydia's hard work pay off. So Rachel and I cannot be more proud of her for everything she's doing and how she's making this new pathway for herself.
Thanks, Isaac. And thanks to everyone listening. We're always grateful for our listeners, and we're hoping that our good was going well for us helps bring joy into your lives as well. We want to remind you that 4Best podcasts are now being released weekly on Wednesdays at 4:44 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure that you subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on whatever podcatcher you're using. And if you want to reach us, you can email us at 4bestspod@gmail.com. And we are working on expanding our social media presence. So you can now find us on X, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
See ya. Bye, everybody.
For best friends since way back when.